and this is that the rape gangs, the gangs of people who gang rape children, are not going to be investigated, or at least there's not going to be an inquiry into what happened in Oldham unless Oldham Council itself decides to do the inquiry in the way that Telford has and other ways. Jess Phillips, who is the Safeguarding Minister, she's a Home Office Minister, she's someone who has campaigned on this for years. Well, she has the power to grant an inquiry. She has the power to say that Home Office resources should be used for some sort of inquiry. She's also the power to say whether there should be a big national inquiry, a statutory inquiry into this. Well, Danny Shaw is a former advisor to the Labour Home Affairs team in opposition. He's also a Home Affairs journalist of great standing. Danny, good to talk to you this morning. Would you have advised Jess Phillips to do what she has done, to deny this inquiry? Was that the right decision, do you think?
Good morning, Peter. Well, I think that the first thing to say is that there has been an inquiry. There was an inquiry commissioned in 2019, reported in 2022, almost 200 pages, an inquiry into allegations of abuse in Oldham, and it produced its conclusions. What is now being called for is something, more expansive. But it seems to me that, you have to take that inquiry as the starting point and decide whether there is anything substantial to be gained by conducting further.
Did much come out of that inquiry? Was there change in this? Because we spoke to a councillor, opposing Labour, a Conservative councillor, but nonetheless a councillor on Oldham Council yesterday who said that there is so much more to be done. These horrific crimes still continue, and he believes that both his party failed in 14 years to do enough about it, and he believes the current government is failing to do enough about it.
Well, I think there's two questions there. The first thing is, if there are allegations and they need to be investigated, but they need to be investigated by the police. The second thing is, if there is to be an inquiry, then I do think that it will have more legitimacy if it's set up locally and conducted by local experts with support. You can't have a public inquiry about every single issue. We've had a national child sexual abuse inquiry. It ran for 7 years. It cost in the region of £200 million. It did in the region of 15 investigations, including investigations into child sexual abuse in Rochdale. It also did a special research project on child sexual abuse in ethnic minority communities.
Is that the J report, the J review?
The Alexis J.
Yeah, but what has happened?
Into child sexual abuse. Well, that's the point, isn't it, Peter? I think, to be honest with you, I think that's more the point, is what's happened to those recommendations, the 20 recommendations from that inquiry.
What happened, and you know far better than I do, but what happened is the Conservative Party in government sat on it. It gathered dust on a shelf for 18 months. They did nothing about the 20 recommendations that were done. And 6 months on into a Labour administration, exactly 6 months today since the election, they have done nothing about that. So they're saying, and they said in a statement, and I've read out the statement numerous times over the last couple of days, I'm not going to do it again today, they've said that they're working at pace to implement those recommendations. Okay, maybe 6 months is a reasonable time to actually get something done on this. And I wonder, having worked with Jess Phillips, there are people who say today, maybe unfairly, and I'd love to talk to her, but she hasn't come on this programme, maybe unfairly, that she has allegations of hypocrisy in regard to this. What do you think of that?
I don't agree with that myself. I think that there's two questions you asked at the beginning. Do we need an inquiry into Oldham? Should the government set it up? I don't think we need another inquiry. I think what we need is action on the recommendations that have already been made in respect to the Oldham inquiry that was commissioned in 2019 and in respect to the independent child sexual abuse inquiry. I'm pretty sure that this government will begin to implement those recommendations once it understands fully the cost implications and all the various other implications of that.
But you've got to ask the Home Office. You've got to ask the Home Office, don't you, Danny? Yeah. And I'm you're not to blame for this by any stretch of the imagination. Of course, you're not. But you've got to ask the Home Office. You've known for 2 years what the recommendations are. Yeah. Why aren't you? You know what Jess Phillips's record is on this. She's talked time and time and time again about violence against women and girls, about rape gangs, about all this stuff. Surely on day one, you're ready to press go on this.
Yeah, I think you've got a good point there, Peter. You know, I do think that 6 months is sufficient time to at least be able to say on the primary recommendations what they're going to do, and if certainly progress isn't made in the next couple of months on that, then I think very serious questions should be asked.
Okay.
I do think you've got a point on that, but I really don't think we need another inquiry looking at these issues. We've got the recommendations. We've had enough talking. We've spent enough money on lawyers, for goodness sake, who make a huge amount of money from public inquiries. What we need is action now. We know what the recommendations are. Let's act on them.
Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that. That's Danny Shaw there. Thank you also to Phil, who's been in touch. He says, good morning, Peter. Regarding the public inquiry for the grooming gangs, when you get any Labour spokesman on, can you ask them this question? Do they think it is in the public interest to know what happened and to have this inquiry? Simple answer. Regards, Phil from Hearts, and Happy New Year as well. Well, Happy New Year to you, Phil. We are going to have on the programme tomorrow, one of our colleagues, Phil Dave, is going to interview Wes Streeting early tomorrow morning. We're going to play out that interview on the programme tomorrow at almost exactly this time, around 10 o'clock. I think we'll probably do it as our top story tomorrow, the interview with Wes Streeting that we have, the Health Secretary, and we will ask him this question. That is something that we will ask him. We'll ask him about this and say, what is going on here? Should there be an inquiry? If not, why not? So we will get an answer from Wes Streeting on this programme tomorrow. Paul in Cornwall says, I'm quite sure that the collapse of Jess Phillips' majority of over 10,000 to about 650 has absolutely no bearing on her decision not to hold a public inquiry into the rape gangs, says Paul. I think his tongue may well be in his cheek there. It can cost, this person, Susan, says, it can cost the country millions of pounds and years for a useless COVID inquiry about cake, but we can't have a national inquiry about Pakistanis raping children. And Brian says, Starmer's position is now untenable, given his role. He was the Director of Public Prosecution over the rape gangs. The man is a disgrace and clearly unfit for office, and he should stand down immediately and face a full investigation. Surely he is finished, says Brian. In fairness to Keir Starmer, not something I say all the time, but I'm just going to look this up because he did actually make some progress on this when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. And it is, factually the case that when Keir Starmer was a Director of Public Prosecutions, there was some action on this. I do have the detail here on this, and I can't just find it at the moment, but I'll come back to it in terms of what he did as Director of Public Prosecutions. Yesterday, I interviewed a man called Peter Garston. He is someone who's heavily involved in this, trying to prevent this happening, standing up, an advocate. This is what he said yesterday to me on Drive.
Before she came into power, and she was full of enthusiasm and wanted to look after the rights of victims and support them. But by her denial of this inquiry, she's sending a very bad message to the victims of abuse who I represented, and they will come to the view that this is yet another attempt by government to avoid giving them justice, despite the protestations that Jess Phillips is putting forward, and indeed other Labour spokespersons that I've heard on the media.
Well, that was Peter Garston yesterday, and interestingly, Marilyn Hawes, who's the Chief Executive of Freedom from Abuse, she has responded to that on Twitter, and I know Marilyn has spoken on this station in the last few days, but I wanted to talk to her specifically about Jess Phillips, because we had Danny Shaw there, who is a pretty reputable, certainly very informed Home Affairs commentator. He worked for the BBC for many years as a Home Affairs commentator. He advised the Labour over the past few years when they were in opposition. Now, Marilyn, I wonder, Danny Shaw said that Jess Phillips has been treated badly here, that she's not a hypocrite. What do you think, and what do you think of what Peter Garston said?
Well, I can see both points. I mean, I'm actually a friend of Peter Garston's, and he's ambassador to my charity. And I take what he says about the statutory investigation. But I also take up on account of how the victims actually will feel enraged. They will feel felled by Jess Phillips. Why isn't she in the hot seat tomorrow and not Wes Streeting? Why isn't she defending her decision? They all run away, don't they? Like scared little rabbits. I mean, and
I've asked her on this programme. I've asked her on this programme since Thursday. My producers have asked her on my programmes. I've told her advisor exactly what programmes I'm on. I'm not saying that, look, governors need to govern. They don't have to do media interviews all the time, although we'd like to hear from Labour a bit more often than we do on this station. But the fact is, West Reading's coming on tomorrow. We'll ask him about it, fair enough, but I'd love to talk to Jess Phillips, because I do think, you know, there is an explanation for this from her. We had this statement, read it out a number of times on Thursday and Friday, but there will be people who you have dealt with, who you fought for, Marilyn, who feel betrayed by this.
Oh, they will feel betrayed. I mean, I deal with victims of abuse all the time, and people that have been involved in these exploitation gangs. They're not grooming gangs. They are exploitative, rape, drug gangs, and it is across the UK. It's not just Oldham, and Oldham have been corrupt for years, and they can't be trusted to do their own investigation, I don't believe anyway. But the bigger picture is, this is not about grooming. It's more than that.
Oh, it's so much more than that, and we need to call them what they are. It is more than that. They are gang rape gangs. They're gangs that gang rape children. They are paedophiles. And it's as we speak right now. It is across the country. If you'd spoke to Andy Burnham knew about this going on in the mid-90s. That's 35 years ago. I've been doing this job for 23 years. I knew of it over 20 years ago, okay? So nothing was happened then. And this is the thing about the inquiries. I do see what Danny Shaw is saying, but I also see what Peter Garston is saying. Danny Shaw's right. Where's the action? Every time we have an inquiry, if we went back to Victoria Colombier and the Lord Lamming report, 70% of that still hasn't been adopted. That's the point. People failed in Oldham. People covered up. People didn't listen. People ignored because they wanted to keep this fake thing of race relations were okay. In the last 48 hours, I have had emails from former police officers who have actually told me this, that across Lancashire, they were paranoid about exposing anything that would be anti-race relations. That's not the point. It doesn't matter. This isn't about racism. This is about a real problem across the UK. And you can't call them Asian gangs. You don't get Japanese men doing this, Chinese, Indonesian. It is predominantly people from the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community. You've got to wake up and smell the coffee. This has got to be dealt with. And what happened is, 35 years ago when nothing happened, it was like small and in secluded areas, or not secluded areas, but known areas. But now it's embedded across the whole of the UK. It's a business model that stretches up, down and across the UK. These gangs are brutal. This is why you're seeing all the stabbings of young people. It's the gangs. The younger members are told by the gang leaders that they have to do these stabbings if there's something that's happened with drugs or they haven't got the money. And you know what's something else I'd like to say, completely off-piste at the moment? This is an absolute embarrassing, heinous situation for the UK. It's dreadful. Where are the faith leaders? Why aren't they all coming out collectively, whatever the faith is, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, Christian, whatever? Not one person has come and condemned this behaviour. There surely is no religion that can accept this. It is outrageous. And Jess Phillips will have her reasons for it, no doubt, but for those victims of this crime, they will feel deeply hurt, deeply betrayed, and that's not what people want to think about, you see. It's all about other things, politics, money, the perpetrators, not the people whose lives have been broken. And as we talk about this now, these things are going on. I had a letter yesterday from a lady who is frightened, lives in Preston. It's not just Lancashire, as I say, it's Telford, it's Cornwall, it's everywhere. But she's frightened of her 11, 13 and 15-year-old daughter walking down the streets of Preston because they have been followed by Pakistani men. She's reported it to the police, she's reported it to the council, she's reported it to her MP. Nobody does anything. And this is why you media are so good. You've thrown this into the spotlight and it needs to stay there. And it is going to stay there, Marilyn,
because this is causing too much damage and harm. You know, it absolutely breaks my heart.
And I want to know, Marilyn, from the government what they're doing about those 20 recommendations we spoke about. I want to know when they'll be implemented. They say they're working at pace. Why were they not ready to go from day one? Well, I want to know that as well. This is why I want to interview Jess Phillips. I'm going to keep asking.
Peter, I would love to go on and ask questions myself to the government, because no government has dealt with this.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter whether they're blue, red, yellow, no one. It's always been the can that's been kicked down the road, and children's lives have been utterly broken.
We will continue to talk about this, and we'll continue to talk to you as well, Marilyn. Thank you for joining us this morning. Marilyn Hawes there, Chief Executive for Freedom from Abuse.